this has been implemented at Colorado State University just about a month ago, July 1, has budget construction, accounts receivable, capital assets management system, that would be your equipment, also your buildings and rooms if you wish, and it will compute depreciation. Effort reporting is part of labor distribution for a research university. Receiving was added to purchasing payables and some business-to-business hooks. If you're going to be using SciQuest, there is a relationship between SciQuest and KFS that makes it very easy to operate. As Mike mentioned, there are separate other communities, the Kuali COIUS, which is the pre-award and compliance, building on the COIUS system that came from MIT, is already in use at a few dozen universities, but is being given the Kuali look and feel, and just like the Indiana system, is being made a little more flexible and table-driven for the Kuali institutions. And Kuali COIUS could be a freestanding system also. Kuali Student is well underway, completing the student system. Kuali Rice, the infrastructure. Kuali Endowment Module is probably technically a project of KFS, not a module. KFS will do all of your dollar accounting for endowment, but KEM gets into keeping track of the individual securities you own, the historical cost, a searchable database, how much money is there for scholarships in the math department, what has been spent this year in each endowment, the projected income for this year, what's available, the projected income for next year, and also help in writing letters to donors, explaining how the money is earning and being spent. The chart of accounts. It has a simple identification number. It's a 7-digit number. It's simply to identify that account. It's not a smart code with a lot of logic in it, although there should be logic that will tell the user what kind of account this is. But the account relates to a lot of attributes, and that's where the smart coding is in the attributes. And the attributes drive reports and business rules and so on. It's higher ed specific. There are function codes it connects to, fund groups, restriction status. Does this account close at year end? Is it ongoing? There are transaction codes as data enters into the general ledger through transactions. There are sub-accounts and sub-object codes. If someone says, and we like to use these for end users a lot, if someone says, look, I know centrally you only need one account, but I want to divide that up into 4 accounts for my management, internal management. You can simply say, well, let's give you some sub-accounts. And then you can always report and even budget by sub-account and have your reports in total, which we might need centrally, and by sub-account, which you might need out in the field. The same way is true with object codes. Besides the account code, you need a 4-digit object code to do a transaction. And you may say, look, centrally we want travel. But someone out in the field says, well, I want to keep track of travel of Professor A versus Professor B, and so on. You can say, look, we'll just open some sub-object codes for you. And then you can have central total object code reporting, or you can have reporting by individual sub-object code. A very nice feature. And there are numerous attributes, probably a couple dozen or more, linked to this account identification number. And it's the attributes that drive reporting, that drive edits, that drive business rules. There are multiple charts if needed. One of our schools has a veterinary hospital. Well, they have a separate chart. You might have multiple campuses, as some do. And when you set these up, you set up the pathway to consolidation so that there's an automatic consolidation at the total university level. At Indiana, the auxiliaries are so big, they're over 100 million, I believe, that they gave them a separate chart. And that's consolidated then into the total corporate chart. If there aren't enough attributes coming with KFS, there are what we call extended attributes. You can add additional attributes. I think the biggest need so far has been state reporting. If your state requires reporting in a very different structure than you find useful internally, this lets you do the crosswalk to state reporting. So the account, the 7-digit number, is simply the tip of the iceberg. Every account relates to an organization, and when you get into organizations, you could have a hierarchy going from a department all the way to a college or to a vice president, and all the way to the president, to the board of trustees. You can have a whole structure in your organization. Organizations can have projects, and those can be identified as part of the accounting transaction line if they want to keep track of things that cross accounts. An organization could have a chart, but most do not. There are what we call higher education function codes will permit you to do FASB or GASB or IPEDS type reporting. Every account belongs to a subfund group, which in turn belongs to a fund group. Your fund group might be plant funds. Your subfund groups would be unexpended plant funds, renewals and replacements, retirement of indebtedness, investment in plant. So each of those subfund groups might have different business edit rules, for example, that would help you, or it might even have different workflow rules because different people work on them. An account can have these extended or custom attributes. Accounts can have sub-accounts. Accounts have object codes when they're being used for a transaction. The object codes have sub-object codes. Attributes can be added not just to an account, but to an organization, to an object code, to any of these items here. So the object type attribute for an object code, at least what you would want to know is it's an asset, liability, a fund balance, revenue, expense, maybe a fund transfer. Object codes can then be grouped into larger groupings, and the intermediate grouping is called a level. And levels can be grouped into a higher grouping called a consolidation. An object consolidation might be all salaries and wages and benefits. At the level grouping, you might have groupings for faculty salaries and benefits, or even tenure track salaries and benefits versus other faculty, or part-time, or non-faculty, full-time salaries and benefits, whatever is useful to you. And that could also drive your budgeting. If you're checking for funds available, will you permit this transaction to go if there's money within a particular grouping? Or perhaps if it's a sponsored account, you will control it at the actual object code level, both for budgets and for checking for sufficient funds. There is a flexible claim on cash feature. Every account in KFS can be an accounting entity. Assets equals liabilities plus fund balance. And the balancing feature as you move money back and forth between accounts is what we call claim on cash or cash ownership. But if you wish, you could take a group of accounts, say unrestricted, and have all of the cash offset in a control account. That is a nice feature for handling your unrestricted funds. Funding year is a future, but it's going to happen because it's needed. Some of our schools have states that have a different fiscal year than the university fiscal year. And funding year permits you to close the books, so to speak, a year on closing for that major funding source. It might also be useful for land